I guess we should probably go ahead and start. Huh? Tanya, do you have any other announcements for folks?
No, that's it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Tanya. And thanks, everyone. My name is Drake Turner. I'm the policy manager at Let's Grow Kids. I'm going to go ahead and start my share. There are a number of us who are co-presenting together, but I'll get us started with the PowerPoint. All right. Can everybody see the screen here? Okay, great. So as I said, my name is Drake Turner. I'm the policy manager at Let's Grow Kids. Why don't we do the rest of the presenters can do introductions, and then Sonia is going to run us through the plan for this session. Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Kenny. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at Let's Grow Kids, and I'm so happy to see so many of you here this morning. Nice to see y'all.
Jen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Horowitz. I am the Policy and Research Director with Let's Grow Kids.
All right, and then Sonia, you're up, and I'm going to move us to the next slide here as well.
Hi, good morning. Sonia Raymond from Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children. I'm the Executive Director. We're glad to see all of you this morning. This is a great group of folks. I would just ask if all of you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves in the chat, just with who you are, what your role is. That would be terrific. Just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions as we're going through all of this, we are going to ask that you kind of, we won't be addressing questions as we move through. We'd like to kind of get through the presentation, but we are asking, as you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and then we will have a question and answer section at the end, and before we break into our breakout groups, and you'll be able to have your questions answered at that point. So as you can see from the agenda, we're doing the welcome and introductions right now. We're then going to have an overview of Bill H171 and get an overview of how it fits into a larger 3-year plan and campaign. You'll learn about the different components outlined in the bill and where we are currently in the process with the bill. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have the Q&A session, and we'll do breakout groups. And at the end, we'll be brought back together for a very quick recap. So I'll turn it over to you, Sarah.
Great. Thanks, Sonia. It's just so fun to watch all of the 51 chats coming through so far with all of you and who you are and where you're coming from this morning. Thank you all so much for joining us. So we're going to be talking, as Sonia said, about childcare this morning, and I hope you'll all stick around for the second issue session this morning as well to find out more about the many issues that are on the Alliance's agenda this year. As Matt and Allie both said, it takes so many different services and people to support children through early childhood. And we are here right now to talk specifically about childcare. And it's very exciting. As you've already heard this morning, there's a bill, H171, which we'll talk all about this morning. So we're very fired up about this. I just want to give a shout out. I saw at least one person here from Robin's Nest Children's Center this morning as y'all were logging on, and Speaker Krowinski referred to her nephew who attends a program that is making such a difference in their family's lives, and that would be Robin's Nest. So shout out to Robin's Nest. I just talked to the speaker and told her how touching her remarks were, and she mentioned that. So thanks to all of you who are here this morning for all the incredible work that you do with kids in our communities every day. I know we have some partners from the Child Development Division on as well, and lots of folks who work in many ways to support kids. So thank you all for being here. If there's one thing that the universe has caught on to in the last year that we all knew already, it is that childcare is essential. And the work that you do is essential in the lives of our children and the lives of our communities and the support of our economy in so many ways. So we had lots of folks previously in the legislature, policymakers who really understood the important role that childcare plays for children, for our communities. And if there were any question in anybody's mind about this, it has been laid to rest over the course of the past year. And we're now seeing huge support for the discussion around how we make childcare work for families, for kids, for the early childhood educators who are doing this critical work in our communities. So I think, Drake, you're going to advance the slides for me, right? Is that how this is working? I've spent the last several days with the Human Services Committee, y'all, so I'm transparently facilitating this workshop here, winging it a little bit, but it's going to be great. So what we have known all along, right, pre-pandemic, is that 3 out of 5 of Vermont's young children don't have access to the childcare they need, that Vermont families are spending nearly 30% of their income on childcare. I was talking to a family this week who was spending over 50% of their income on childcare, and that's even with state support sometimes that folks are paying to 30%. The median annual income for a Vermont early childhood educator is $27,600, often without benefits. So clearly the system is not working right now, right? And all of these inequities and difficulties have only been exacerbated by COVID-19. I don't think I'm saying anything that anyone on this in this workshop right now doesn't know, but it's important that we keep putting these numbers out there and keep talking about these critically important issues that predated the pandemic, are even worse now, and that we need to come together as a state to address. So this is where we were even pre-pandemic, and these are some of the issues that H171 is aiming to address. So what our plan is, we at Let's Grow Kids have been working with lots of you all across this group and many others over the last several years to think about what are some visionary solutions to this childcare crisis that we have in Vermont. We've also been engaged in a lot of national conversations. This problem is not unique to Vermont, but we are uniquely positioned to solve it in Vermont, I think. So we have spent the last many months diving deep into all of the work that's happened to date through the Blue Ribbon Commission, a lot of the work that many of you were engaged with the Building Vermont's Future from the Child Up work that was led by Building Bright Futures, the think tank that happened, all of these many reports and all the good thinking and a lot of the national conversations and pulling together proposals for what could really fundamentally change the way we approach childcare in the state. And so we have launched a 3-year plan that we officially launched in January. And the first step this year is to pass H171, which we're going to be talking about in a little more detail in a minute. So this bill lays the foundation of the future childcare system by establishing our overall state goals for childcare affordability, access, and quality. And it also puts into place some immediate short-term investments. Next year in 2022, we'll be supporting the stakeholder processes that are started in H171. There's going to be some studies and lots of groundwork being laid over the course of the next week that we'll all be engaged in. Complete legislative work next year, and via the newly formed Let's Grow Kids Action Network, which is Let's Grow Kids' sister organization. We're going to be organizing in communities to support legislators who've championed childcare legislation when we're approaching those 2022 elections, to make sure that we have champions in the legislature for 2023, which is when we will fully implement all of these goals that are set forth in H171. So fully implementing affordability, access, quality, and accountability measures, and infusing resources into the system to be able to help us meet these goals. So that's the 3-year plan. And the overarching components of this plan are creating an equitable childcare system. We're going to talk about each of these more in a minute. It's affordable, it's high quality, it's accessible, it's accountable, and sustainable. So those are our overarching goals that we're pushing towards with H171 and this 3-year plan. We're going to dive into each of these goals, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what's in the bill itself and where it's at. And then, as Sonia said, we'll break out and we'll have some questions and answers, and then we'll break out and talk a little bit more in depth about how we can talk to legislators about the importance of this bill. So I think I'm turning it over to Drake.
Thanks, Sarah. That was awesome. So yeah, as Sarah teed up perfectly, we want to just really briefly, hopefully briefly, go through what we mean by these 5 words, both as sort of our big goals in H1 here. And so to start off, I want to just talk a little bit about affordability, which I think, as we all know, is a really key component of the system that we know Vermont needs for early childhood education. So the sort of guiding star around affordability for our 3-year campaign is that no family will spend more than 10% of their income on childcare. And our hope is that in many cases, families will spend less than that in the future system that we want to build. So in H171 this year, that's a really audacious goal. And
Oh no, I think Drake's.
H171 does, and as it has passed out of the House Human Services Committee yesterday, that is one of the intentions of that bill. And I just got a note that my internet connection is unstable, so if anyone is having an issue seeing the slides, please let me know. So H171, as I mentioned, sets that goal in statute. And then it also does things this year to get us closer to a more affordable childcare system for families in Vermont. So it continues the redesign of the childcare financial assistance program to better meet families' needs right now. And we're currently in year 3 of that 5-year redesign plan, which is a really important year. And so we are in that bill. It outlines what year 3 is and how to pursue the affordability goals of that plan this year. And then the bill also calls on the state to study what it would mean to use, rather than the current way a lot of CCFAP supports are determined, to use a true cost of care methodology to determine CCFAP reimbursement rates. And as part of that true cost of care methodology, fair compensation for early childhood educators is also a really key component of that. So we want to move toward a place where families are able to afford care and where programs are adequately compensated so they're able to support their early childhood educators. There's a lot more to that, but I'm going to stop myself there so we can move on to the next priority, which I believe Sonia is going to speak to.
Thank you, Drake. So as we know, high quality basically is hinged on the quality of the early educators in the program. And so to that end, this bill includes 3 different supports that will address quality. 2 of them are meant for those that are currently working in the workforce, a minimum of 30 hours. And the third is a prospective support for those who are attending college, either trying to attain their ECE or early childhood education degree or early childhood special ed degree. So the first would be loan repayment. That's really targeted at folks who are who currently have an associate's or a bachelor's degree and are working again in our early education programs. It's really meant to address the ability to keep those folks working in those programs so that they're able to pay their student loans. So earning no more than $50,000 a year, which I think is not a hard eligibility criteria for anyone in this field to meet, it will give them up to $4,000 of loan repayment relief per year for anyone who has gotten their degree in the last 5 years. So we also have another support for those in the workforce currently, and that is for scholarships, specifically asking to increase our scholarship program to include a bachelor's program and fully support those who wish to attain apprenticeship, their associates, bachelor's, and teacher licensure. So it'd be the full gamut. And then the third, it would be that support for those that are currently or want to go to college to get their early childhood or early childhood special ed degree. And that's the prospective. And that actually is a component where those folks would then in turn be committing to working in the workforce afterwards for a period of years. So those are the 3 supports that we have in the bill that address quality. And I think I'm turning it to Sarah now.
You are, great. So priority number 3 in our plan, and which is addressed in H171 is, well, it's actually addressed in the governor's budget, is accessibility. So we want to make sure that every child will have access to high quality childcare when and where they need it. That's our big picture goal. The governor's proposed budget, which the Appropriations Committee is working on right now, would continue state investment in childcare capacity development. I know a number of programs here today and all around the state have been supported through these capacity development funds that the state has allocated over the past few years, which we've been helping to administer through the Make Way for Kids grants, have really helped to build new slots and expand existing programs all around the state. And so the governor's budget does continue to invest in those capacity development grants, which is a critical part of building up the infrastructure that we need for to make sure that every family has access to childcare. And then priority 4 is accountability. So we need a system that is accountable to families, to policymakers, and to all of you, to all of the stakeholders who have to work within this system every day. So our goal is that the system will have well-coordinated and transparent governance, administrative and accountability structures, and resources, which is critically important. And H171 moves us toward this goal in 3 really important ways. So it invests in the Bright Futures Information System redesign, which is very exciting. I know our partners at the Child Development Division at DCF and many of you, and we certainly at Let's Grow Kids have been talking for years about the need for a new IT system to support Vermont's childcare system. This really became apparent during the pandemic, and CDD has had to put in really heroic amounts of hours and work to try to make the system work with the outdated infrastructure that is in place for them right now. So the good news is that H171 appropriates and the governor's budget includes funding for the full redesign of the Bright Futures Information System, which is really exciting and will provide updated IT infrastructure for the administrators who are managing this program, for all the programs that are interfacing with it, for families who need to be able to access care, apply for child care financial assistance, and other things. So we're really excited about that project. And the first module of that new system is, I believe, in the design phase, and our partners at CDD are working with potential vendors to bring that online this year. The second component is that H171 convenes stakeholders to advise the child care system. Through Building Bright Futures, we have a number of Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees that are already convening lots of stakeholders from all around the state to think about various components of the early childhood system. H171 will support the work that the Early Learning and Development Committee is doing right now through BBF, and expands the role of that committee and adds some specific designated membership in addition to the folks who are currently at that table. And really charges that committee with convening stakeholders to advise the system and to make sure that that voices of people most impacted by the program, by our programs in the state and by our policies are at the table and helping to inform the work as it moves forward. And the third piece is a very important, what's now called a systems analysis study in H171. Which would be administered by Building Bright Futures through a consultant, and would do a very comprehensive look at the current governance and administration structures, sort of all of our governance systems in the child care system, and make recommendations to strengthen and streamline those, and to ensure that stakeholder voices are a part of that work. So that H171 also builds that capacity. For that study to happen. I'll just note that folks are noting in the chat, if you're having trouble with your bandwidth, it does sometimes help to turn off your own video. At least that helps for me sometimes to turn off my video, and then my computer is better able to manage the Zoom. So that's the accountability piece. And then I think I am handing it over to Jen to talk about the sustainability priority.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So the last major component of H171 is really focused on how do we ensure that there is sustainable funding for the system moving forward. We want to be able to achieve this system, and then we want to be able to fund it moving into the future. So H171 creates a study in order to look at what is the cost of implementing all of these best practices for high quality, affordable early childhood education, and then what are different options in terms of how could we pay for it moving forward. So the state is, through this study process, is allowed to hire a consultant who has expertise in doing this type of analysis, working closely with the Joint Fiscal Office. I'm going to miss somebody, the state auditor, the state treasurer, the Secretary of Administration, Building Bright Futures, and a number of other stakeholders, really encouraging them to look to national experts who have expertise in this area. Oh, sorry, also the Department for Children and Families. I knew I was going to miss someone. And really be able to cost out all of these components we've talked about thus far. So wanting to make sure that no family spends more than 10% of their annual income on childcare, wanting to ensure that early childhood educators are receiving compensation on par with their peers in other fields, wanting to make sure that we are making payments based on enrollment versus attendance, wanting to make sure programs have that cost, are receiving that cost of care, how, covering all of the essentials of what it takes to offer high quality early childhood education programming. Basically updating some of the work that was really started by the Blue Ribbon Commission, as Sarah noted earlier, and then figuring out kind of what are those options for stable long-term funding in order to make sure that we have a sustainable system moving forward.
Great, thanks, Jen. So to summarize all of that information, we've probably just dumped a lot of words at you all. I just want to quickly go through this slide, which kind of encapsulates a lot of what we've all said. So H171 really combines some short-term and long-term goals. So there's a lot at play here. In the short term, the bill makes immediate investments in IT, CCFAP, as outlined in the governor's budget as well, and it also advances the childcare workforce through those scholarships and loan repayment supports that Sonia discussed. And it also has this long-term vision that we're all sort of working towards. So making childcare more affordable, fairly compensating and advancing Vermont's early childhood education workforce, and expanding access to high quality childcare. And then it also launches those two studies that Sarah and Jen mentioned to really dig deeper into what long-term funding and governance plans for our early care and education system look like, and give us sort of the wider variety of options to pursue to get to those longer term goals in the future. So there's a lot at play here, but we're really excited about where we've been and where we're headed. So before we move to Q&A and get this slide come off the screen so we can look at each other, Sarah and I just wanted to give a brief update on what's happening with H171. We have, it's kind of wild to think that it's only been a couple of months of the legislative session. It feels like so much has happened. And yet we've all just been sitting in our homes. So we've, this is all happening virtually, which I think there are some benefits to that. And it also makes advocacy a lot more complicated. It makes legislating a lot more difficult when people can't be in person together. But nevertheless, H171 has had a lot of support and a lot of momentum since it was introduced in the House. I'm sure someone mentioned that there are 95 sponsors on the bill from Democrats, Republicans, progressives, and independents. So there's just a lot of support behind this bill, which is due in large part to all of you contacting your legislators and all of the work that you've done for years in the past to really show just how important this work is, this field is. And we're really, really excited to share that yesterday, as we mentioned, H171 passed out of the House Human Services Committee unanimously, which is a really big deal. So Sarah, do you want to just talk a little bit about what we are anticipating the next steps are for the bill, and then we can start to address questions?
Sure thing. So yesterday was an exciting day, and the Human Services Committee has been working really thoughtfully and diligently on the bill. And so that vote was really great, and it's just the first step in a long process for this bill. So it's great that it came out of the Human Services Committee so strongly, and that it still contains all of the core components that we've been talking about this morning. because there are lots more committees that will be reviewing it. So we expect that it should be on the House calendar today. I meant to look this morning and haven't yet, which means that it's sort of on notice for the full House that the first committee has passed it. We expect that the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee will probably informally, they won't take formal possession of the bill, but will have a conversation and sort of weigh in on the bill. The Commerce and Economic Development Committee is kind of an unusual one to think about them taking a child care bill. Normally that works, it's pretty squarely within the Human Services Committee. But the Commerce and Economic Development Committee has really been talking over the past couple of years about how they can't really do economic development or workforce development in the state without employees having access to childcare. And they're also thinking about long-term that kids who have high quality early childhood education are much better able to be in the workforce later. So they're really thinking about our future workforce and our current workforce. So they'll be having a conversation about the bill and probably specifically about the early childhood educator workforce components that Sonia touched on. And then we expect the bill will go to the Ways and Means Committee, which is the committee that raises the revenue in the state. The Appropriations Committee allocates where funds should go, and the Ways and Means Committee in the House anyway figures out how we're going to find those funds. So that committee will probably take a look at the financing study, because that's specifically looking at how much will this system cost and what are potential ways to finance it. And then it will definitely go to the Appropriations Committee, because there are significant appropriations in the bill, just over $13 million total, most of which is already in the governor's budget. And so in the budget that the Appropriations Committee is working with, the bill will wind up with appropriations, and then it will go to the full House floor for a vote. We expect that at some point in the next 2 weeks. There's this magic date called crossover in the legislature, which many of you may have heard of, which is the date by which bills need to have been voted on by their relevant policy committees and gone on to the sort of the money pieces, the Appropriations Committee. So that deadline is this Friday, day after tomorrow, by which all of bills need to have come out of the policy committees and be headed toward the House floor or the Senate floor on the Senate side. And that's in part because, or mostly because they want each bill has to go through both chambers, both the House and the Senate. And so they want to make sure that the other chamber has ample time before adjournment to consider each bill. So that deadline is this Friday. So we seem to be on track with the Human Services Committee vote yesterday and Commerce looking at the bill. And then all money bills have a crossover deadline of next Friday. So at some point in the next 2 weeks, this bill will be done its work in the House committees, voted on by the full House of Representatives, and then we'll head over, assuming that the full House supports the bill, we'll head over to the Senate, where we start the whole process over again. And we'll likely be starting in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. And then we'll go through the same sort of gamut of committees on the Senate side before being voted on by the full Senate. And then if there are two different versions, the bill then goes to a conference committee of 3 members of each, the House and the Senate, to get all the details. So we still have a long way to go, and the bill is so strong, as Drake said, because all of you and all of your colleagues all around the state have been doing an amazing job of talking to policymakers over the past many years, and especially in the past several months, of really helping them appreciate how critically important childcare is, and specifically the components of this bill and these goals that it sets, how important those are. So we're really going to be continuing to need you in the coming months as the bill continues to make its way, to be talking to folks about how important the different provisions are and making sure that they're all in the bill at every step of the way. So that's where we are at. Drake, did you want to talk a little bit about the advocacy forms and the tools that we're providing for folks to take that action?
Sure. Yeah, and I think we can also talk about these in breakout groups too. But we've this year, we're always trying to find ways to facilitate conversations and communication between folks and their legislators and decision makers. And this year we have started to utilize a tool that actually makes that a lot faster and simpler. So we'll be sending this out at some point today, but they're called advocacy forms. You don't need to know what that term is, but it essentially allows you to input your address, be connected with your specific legislators, and then we have a lot of customized messages to help support folks' communications that are also editable. So we will have a lot of opportunities for folks to connect with their legislators and their elected officials as the bill moves, because as Sarah mentioned, there are a lot of steps here. And we need to make sure that our decision makers and folks in the legislature know how much support H171 has and how important it is for them to continue their work to make the changes that we know are needed in our early childhood education system. So we'll keep you all in the loop about that and let us know if you have any questions. And speaking of questions, do folks have any about what we just said? I'm going to stop my share for a moment. So I think some of our internal folks have been monitoring the chat. So I don't know if anyone has anything they want to.
There was one question from Sherry about the documents all the detailed documents that Sonia shared with the workforce information. And she was wondering if that was in some sort of document form to be shared.
Yes, I can field that one. First of all, we can share a link, or actually I think we all have in our Whova platform, a link to the ECDL issue guide, which is a helpful document that's got a page overview basically of every issue that's on the Alliance's agenda. So that has a lot of the sort of high level content that we've shared today is encapsulated in that one page that's on the childcare is essential issue. We are hoping to have, I'm actually going to, while the next question is happening, I'm going to just take a quick peek at the House calendar and see if we have a copy of the bill that we can share, because honestly, for the scholarships and the loan repayment support program, because they're totally new, like they're newly enumerated in statute for the current scholarships and their new programs for the new scholarships and loan repayment support, the language is actually relatively easy to read. So we'll share the link to that, to the bill itself with you all, and you can look through that. We are working on a handout that would be specifically about the workforce component. We have it today. So I don't know if any of my colleagues can think of another resource that has that level of detail, because it was helpful.
Yeah, and Sarah mentioned the documents in your Whova platform. If you haven't seen that yet, like there's on the left-hand side of the screen where your registration is with your links, there's all kinds of tabs. I have not explored them all, but the documents one really is helpful, and it does have all the handouts from today's session. So it'll be on the left-hand side of your Whova screen.
If folks haven't used the chat for questions, you can also feel free to either raise your hand or just ask now. We're happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
And I am putting a link in the chat. Y'all are going to get, because I'm a policy nerd, where you're going to get a little deep in the weeds with me here for a second, but I'm sharing a link to the House calendar today. So every day when the House convenes all together, all the members of the House, and same in the Senate, they have a calendar that's all the bills that they're going to be talking about that day. And there's a section of that calendar called the notice calendar, which is where bills that are coming up are posted, so folks can have a chance in advance to read through them. So if you click on the link I just shared to the House calendar, it will take you to the 41-page document that is their calendar for today. And you'll see under the notice calendar, it lists, this is kind of a fun, because I'm also a civics nerd, it's a fun walk for you all to see all the different things that the House will be considering today and in the coming days. But under the notice calendar on the second page, you will see H171 on page 247, and it's actually the little number 247 is a link, so it'll take you right to where H171 starts in the calendar, and that is the text of what the Human Services Committee passed yesterday. And it can be a little complicated because some of it is amending current statute. So the text that is underlined is language that will be added to the statute. And if you go down to page 250 of the calendar, which is page 25 of the PDF, you'll see section 6, which is workforce supports. And you can actually read the language for the scholarships for current early childhood providers. And the word providers is this is the legislature's language. So there's the current scholarships, which is currently the TEACH program. There's the prospective early childhood scholarships, and then the student loan repayment assistance. And it lays out in pretty sort of lay people language what those pieces will be available for people who really want to get into the weeds. I think we've also had a question come in about another bill that's been introduced, which is H394, which was just introduced this week. And that is the bill, it's not H171. There's a separate bill that was just introduced this week that would, you may have heard that the governor has proposed transitioning the Child Development Division to the Agency of Education and other departments in the Agency of Human Services. So H394 is a bill that was just introduced this week that would sort of enact that proposal. Because it was just introduced this week and crossover is Friday, it is highly unlikely that that bill is actually going to be moving anywhere. And also because the legislature has not been very receptive to that idea so far. So what is in H171 is the systems analysis study. That was actually something that was being considered long before the governor's proposal. And H171, the systems analysis study, really does a comprehensive look at what does the current system look like for governing early childhood education in Vermont. What are the strengths of it? What are the gaps? What parts need more resources? And we'll make a recommendation back to the legislature at the end of next year. So that is sort of what the Human Services Committee in their conversations have said. That's the vehicle for moving forward and thinking about what should administration of the early childhood education system look like. So there is another bill out there. I know there's been a lot of conversation about it sort of informally. That bill has just been introduced, and it really is just sort of putting into place what the governor has proposed in terms of CDD. And we don't see that bill moving anywhere at this moment. They're really looking more at the components of H171 as a vehicle for that conversation to happen.
You see the question, Sarah, from Irma about the IT?
Yes, the IT proposal. What that is exactly, yes. So you may be familiar with BFIS, right, or BFIS, or the Bright Futures Information System, which supports early childhood education programs in accessing CDD and early childhood educators and maintaining credentials. It's how CDD sort of administers CCFAP and the credentials and all of those pieces. So that system is quite outdated. I think the commissioner of DCF used the term rickety multiple times in testimony, and has been causing a lot of headaches for a lot of people here, including folks at CDD, for a long time. So this system would be modernizing that IT system, modernizing BFIS. So putting into place a whole new system gradually over the course of the next couple of years, starting with the component that supports the child care financial assistance program. And I think that Crystal and Melissa from CDD are on, and I would welcome either of you to chime in if there's more detail you can share about that piece specifically.
Great. All right. I think that we're actually just on time to move into our breakout groups. So we're going to break into 4 groups, and folks can ask more questions when we move into those breakout groups. I'm going to share my screen just one more time. And Jen is sharing in the chat a worksheet that we can use. So we want to spend some time working together to kind of strategize the best way to talk to legislators about H171 and about investing in our early childhood education system. And we'll have about 15 minutes to do that, 10 to 15 minutes, which will be great. So Jen is going to move everyone into breakout groups for us to chat about this in slightly smaller groups.
And before I do that, just really quickly, the link that I put into the chat, if you are someone who doesn't use Google Docs, there's an option to copy and you can paste it into a Word document on your screen, or if you have an email program up, you could paste the content in there, because we'll be using those kind of question prompts to start off our discussion. And also, please bear with me as I get everyone into your breakout groups. It will probably take a minute or two, but then we can continue our conversation.